Year 4 is uploading for Mario Cristobal. It is the most talented roster Miami's had in years. Here are the expectations that the Miami Hurricanes must reach in 2025.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, if there is such a thing. I feel like this is more of a hangover Monday after the Derrek Cooper to Texas announcement last night. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and host of Postgame on the Miami Hurricanes radio network. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. On this busy Monday episode, we're going to break down, we'll introduce a special guest in a second. We'll break down positions to watch in fall camp, what we think the top battles are going to be. That starts in 10 days, by the way, July 31st. Yeah, we'll talk about Derrek Cooper, why Miami missed, why Texas was more appealing, and what happens next. But let's start with talent and expectations. And man, so happy to bring in, you guys already know D-Money from CanesInsight.com. I mean, a guy who really needs no introduction on this show. D, how are you? Thank you for joining us, man.
Doing great, man. Not as good as you. 6 weeks in Italy. That's like Leonardo DiCaprio, Richard Branson territory. Not too many people can get away with that one. So, shout out to you.
I appreciate that, man. And shout out to you guys, you and Pete and everybody at Canes Insight and the work that you guys do. It's so, all right, you would know this, D, better as well as anybody because you're a Miami historian. You follow this program through the good times and the bad times. When you look at the overall talent level heading into 2025, when was the last time you have felt like this bullish on the roster and on the depth?
It's interesting because you got to think looking backwards and saying, hey, now looking back, this roster had all this talent, or like, what did you feel going into the year? Because if you go back and look at some of those 2013, like some of those golden teams, you didn't think of it at the time, but you go back and look and the whole starting lineups in the NFL at some point. So going into it, I don't know. I mean, look, you go back to last year, you felt pretty bullish going in because of the offense. Cam Ward looked like Cam Ward at this point, so you felt pretty confident that he would do something like what he did. I mean, number one overall pick's hard to predict, but stardom and all that, you could see at this point already. Arroyo and Restrepo, they were already starting to show what they could do. Offensive line you felt good about. So offensively, last year, definitely. But the defense, you had question marks going into last year. That's not revisionist. At the time, we all had questions. I know you talked about on your show. We talked about on our show. I don't think we expected the defensive line to have the issues they had as far as just all the movement and just ineffective matching of player and scheme that you saw up front. I think you expected more from that group. And then the miscommunications and stuff that you saw, like as far as just guys not knowing where to go, pointing to each other, just looking confused before the snap, all that. I don't know if you expected that in year 2 of the Guidry system with some experienced players on the back seven. So you had questions on the defense last year, maybe not to the extent of what we actually saw, but overall, man, you have to go back a while. I would say going back to probably talent-wise, yeah, those early golden years, but you had the questions with D'Onofrio and all those kind of things, which we have a new defensive coordinator. We'll see what happens with him. But yeah, it's a complete roster, more so than last year, which was more tilted towards Ward, the receivers, Restrepo and Arroyo particularly, and then the power of the running game.
We're 10 days away, July 31st, from training camp opening up. And of course, it's going to be, the best look that the media will have had since going back to spring football. And so, there's a little bit of a mystery surrounding Carson Beck, D. I mean, I know that there are offseason workouts he's been engaged in. But this is not something that media, certainly not fans, have been able to watch so far. But what have you been hearing in terms of his recovery, of course, coming off the elbow surgery, the milestones that he's hitting in terms of his health, and what's the overall buzz been for Miami's new quarterback one with all this offseason work?
I mean, NFL quarterback, they had just seen the number 1 overall pick, so their frame of reference is pretty good, right? You know what it's supposed to look like. And I think throwing wise, just arm strength wise, the combination of arm strength, accuracy, touch, the ability to layer throws, all that. And we'll throw athleticism into the mix as well, just overall kind of twitchiness and suddenness. I'm told Beck and Ward are pretty similar based on early returns. I think the difference between a Ward and a Beck would be Ward, his intangibles were so elite in every category, meaning the IQ in the classroom, on the football field, kind of social dynamics. He was just that extroverted leader. Everybody loved him. He's one of the few guys that had A+ in all those intangible categories. With Beck, very smart, very tough. I've heard nothing negative as far as people like him. He's very confident. He's different than a TVD, for example, and just more confident in his skin. The two things that I think Ward had that he didn't is Ward outside the pocket was a little more dangerous, not to run necessarily, but as far as using the whole field, he was that point guard on a fast break that he could see everything when he rolled out of the pocket. Whereas Beck is more like if he rolls out, he's going in a smaller, lane, let's say, to throw, but just as athletic in terms of running and jumping and all that, maybe more athletic with Beck. Then Ward also, like we talked about, had that personality that was front of the line, loudest voice in the room, whereas Beck much more quiet. So I'd say those are the differences. But in terms of what I'm hearing about Beck's athleticism, arm strength, and just overall arm talent, very similar to the number 1 overall pick in the draft.
I like to hear that. And then in terms of the receiving core, and I know you had written at CanesInsight, pretty excited about the talent level there, and I think it's going to surprise a lot of people. There's always a little bit of concern from Miami fans just based on how many of their top pass catchers you've got to replace from last year. But again, this is one of those things where on paper everything looks pretty good there. Like, how deep do you expect that receiver rotation to be? Because last year, they had their kind of top 4 guys, and they didn't rotate a whole lot, but I think we could see a lot more guys, including a couple true freshmen, hitting the field this year.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see, right? So I know in spring, I thought the true freshmen were outstanding, all 3 of them, Malachi Toney, Josh Moore, Dalen Upshaw. We'll see, right? They've had the summer to work. Now you have Carson Beck. You didn't have Carson Beck in the spring. So who's he going to like? Who's going to have that connection with? It's hard to say. In terms of the veterans, CJ Daniels played a little bit in spring, was still coming back from that foot injury, which limited him at LSU. He got surgery, came back slowly right there at the end of spring, made some great catches. Now I'm hearing he's running well. He looks more like the guy at Liberty, which was more of a dynamic threat as opposed to possession receiver, which he was at LSU. Great intangibles. He's the guy that's teaching everybody. I think him and Beck are going to have a nice chemistry because Beck likes that bigger contested catch type of receiver. They got Colby Young last year early on in the season before he got suspended. Beck went to him a lot. So Daniels, I think, could fit that mold. Trader, you're counting on him a lot. He's got to stay healthy. Got to just be durable. The talent's there. And then the name I hear about as far as star potential, Malachi Toney. Of those true freshmen, he's the one you hear the most about. And it's not like, hey, this guy can help us as a freshman. It's more like, hey, this guy might be the talk of the town halfway through the year.
Moving over to the defensive side, so many new faces, so many new coaches as well, which I think had to be done. I mean, you don't want to go status quo from last year. Anyone you've heard, though, D, who's really been standing out in the offseason workouts and who we should really look out for come July 31st when training camp starts?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's the 3 levels, right? So on the defensive line, you have 4 5-star signees plus a Ruben Bain who is projected as a first-round pick if he performs as he is expected to, probably more in line with what he did as a freshman. So that's a lot of talent on paper. That's really, to me, the key of this season is, can those guys translate what's on paper to the field, which means Bain playing really closer to his freshman form, but I mean, he's a junior, so you expect even better than that. And then Justin Scott, Armando Blunt, Marquise Lightfoot, Hayden Lowe, those are your 4 5-star signees on the defensive line. All are expected to play. All are generating good buzz in the offseason. Did well in spring. New defense with Corey Heatherman, Damian Lewis in there as well as a defensive tackles coach. Those guys have to perform. If you can get the production out of those guys, now you're starting to become more of a contender, because contenders have first, second round picks up front, and those are usually your 5-star guys at that particular spot, the defensive line. In terms of the linebacker, the name you hear about a lot, Mo Torre, from Rutgers, coming back from that ACL. He'll be cleared like full go for contact sometime during camp, probably in the first couple of weeks, but he's running around now pretty much normal. And the word you hear about him, both from a leadership standpoint, he's a 2019 signee. So, I mean, he's been there for a long time in college. And then just the physical dimensions, he looks the part, he can run. He's making plays that linebackers haven't made at UM in a while, plus a leader that Miami hasn't had in a while. Just again, because he's 2 years older. He's 3 years older than Wesley Bassane, who's a senior. Just to put it in perspective, Wesley Bassane's class of 22. He's class of 2019. So the age thing is big, and then he can run. So I'd watch him at linebacker. Again, health permitting, but he's running around perfectly now. He'll be clear at some point during camp, barring any setback, and like full speed. Defensive backs, you brought in half, the whole roster pretty much is new. So Xavier Lucas, the transfer from Wisconsin, that he was so good that Wisconsin sued Miami, right? So you expect him to perform. Damari Brown, someone who's a blue chip signee a couple of years ago. He was injured. He's been injured off and on, was injured for the beginning of spring, came back at the end, looked really, really good at corner. He's someone to keep an eye on. Ethan O'Connor, you beat Georgia for him as another corner, Washington State transfer. Zechariah Poyser, you also defeated Georgia for him in the portal recruiting battle. Jacksonville State transfer, freshman All-America there, now coming to play safety at Miami. Those are just some of the names. One name I'd add to that mix also, Keontae Scott from Auburn. This is somebody who was a big-time nickel in 2023 as just a big physical nickel, 6 foot, 180 pounds, 4.4 speed. Also was the best punt returner in the SEC at that time. His coach, Zach Etheridge, left to Houston. He stayed at Auburn. He moved outside and then really struggled there, lost his confidence. He was much more of an NFL prospect at nickel than outside, where he struggled mightily. That also affected his punt returning, which took a step back. So now you think he's back at nickel. He's reunited with his old coach, Zach Etheridge, who's now at the University of Miami. Can he rekindle that magic in the slot as a returner? He has the tools, NFL-type prospect, and so far so good in the offseason.
We got D Money from CanesInsight with us. We'll turn our attention to recruiting when we come back. Why did Miami miss out on Derrek Cooper, and what happens next? You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. We go from D Money to Monarch Money. Do you ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Guys, Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Now, 6 weeks in Europe was not cheap, so I've had to lean heavily on Monarch Money before my trip and after my trip. Again, guys, it puts all my financial information, my spending, and analysis on that all in one place. So I know when I need to cut back on the extra streaming services, the extra food delivery costs, Monarch helps me put all of that and helps me analyze all of that. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch. We're live, by the way, here, 8:30 in the morning on Monday. We don't usually go on this early, but I'm on the road to Charlotte in a few minutes for ACC Media Days. I'll have a one-on-one with Carson Beck, one-on-one with Mario Cristobal, and so much more coming up later on this week. So make sure you guys tune in and make sure you make Locked On ACC your next listen, because we'll have a lot of content out there live from ACC Media Days as well. But we're talking Miami Hurricanes football with D Money, who does an awesome job. He's the owner at CanesInsight.com. I know that a lot of our viewers watch his stuff and vice versa. So this is like the Avengers and the DC universe coming together, or something crazy like that. And D, I got to ask you. I know you were, and by the way, I praise you so much for going live like during and right after the Derrek Cooper commitment, because I just wanted to have a few cocktails and go to bed after he chose Texas last night. Not that that was unexpected, but what do you think were the big factors there? I mean, this is, an important South Florida player, a 5-star out of Chaminade, really big-time Miami target. He chooses to play for the Longhorns. In your mind, what were the big factors towards that decision?
I would say, look, everybody's going to say money. I think when Miami gets a player, they say it's money, right? So you don't lose a player because you don't have money and then get the number one overall player because you have the most money, which is what Miami did with Jackson Cantwell. And that was the narrative coming out of there. So I don't read too much. Sometimes you can read into the money part because the money thing is real. I would say with Cooper, that wouldn't be the direction I would go. I just think ultimately, look, the top player in South Florida, we've had a tough time getting those guys, going back to Patrick Peterson, formerly Patrick Johnson at Pompano Beach, Ely back in 2008. So this is not something new. I think the problem is you've seen top players leave, and you've seen top players often have success when they leave and go to the first round, right? Jeremiah Smith being the most recent example of that. So I think sometimes people need to take a step back and put themselves in the shoes of the player. And the player, if you're a top prospect in South Florida and you look at your predecessors, guys you look up to, guys you probably personally know, you see them leaving the state and having success, and you see guys going to Miami and maybe not going as high as they want in the draft, not winning as much. You've probably been to this stadium when it's not so packed. They give tickets to high schoolers and Pop Warner players from a young age. So Cooper, I don't know, but I'm guessing he's seen the stadium not at his best or the team not at its best. So that's why I think South Florida players, particularly these top South Florida players, maybe have a different perspective on the whole thing than others. In this case, he called Texas running back you, and people went insane in our comments. But it's like, remember, my age starts with a 4, right? I'm guessing yours does too.
Yeah, it does.
So for us, yes, Miami's obviously running back you. You go back to the Hall of Famers that we put out in succession and elite players. However, if you're talking about a 17-year-old person, Bijan Robinson was a few years ago top 10 pick out of Texas. He said they put up 5 running backs in the NFL in the last 3 years. I mean, that's going to be more relevant to him than what Frank Gore did or what Edgar James did or what Willis McGahee did. I mean, he wasn't even alive. So
that's right.
I think that's the way, again, we look at it from our perspective. You got to look at it from their perspective. And I think the job for Miami is you have to get over the hump. And that means, like, yes, we won last year. I don't think any Miami fan would say we got over the hump last year, right? If you're just being honest as a fan. And with players, we need to get those South Florida guys into the first round, guys that everybody knows are the best player when they're in high school. They go to Miami, then in the first round. That's the kind of pathway you want to establish if you want to get the Derrek Coopers, Amari Coopers, Calvin Ridleys, Jerry Jeudy's, Jeremiah Smiths, Dalvin Cooks, and we can go on and on with these guys. So that's the pathway you want to establish. Ruben Bain going first round would be a good start because he's someone that kind of would be wire to wire, top player in South Florida, goes to Miami, goes to the first round. You want to establish that. But right now, I mean, yeah, I think you're playing from behind from a brand perspective. You're going to win some battles. You look at the South Florida players in the class. You got Jordan Lyle, you got Mark Fletcher, you got Ruben Bain, Armando Blunt, Frederic, Lucas, Basainth, JoJo Trader, Malachi Tony. You got a lot of guys from South Florida there, but you got to get over the hump, I think, with these top players to get a guy like Derrek Cooper consistently.
And it's well said. And for everything you just said, it points out the truth that not every great South Florida player is just going to have this blind loyalty to Miami. And, which makes me really glad that Mario Cristobal is a great recruiter and they have the type of resources to recruit nationally, right? To get kids out of Georgia, to get kids out of California like Vance Spafford and Texas and the Midwest and so on. Because, every now and then, when Miami will land a player from out of state, I'll see comments like, wait, why aren't we focusing on South Florida? Be like Schnellenberger State of Miami. It's like, you can't necessarily trust all these South Florida kids to be blindly loyal. And not saying they have to be, right? It's the most important decision of their lives to this point where they go to college. But if you can't depend on every top South Florida kid to bleed orange and green, you better be able to recruit nationally.
Alex, on that point, so with our kids, I know you have a son. When you're picking a school for your son or daughter or whoever, you use your brain a lot of times, more so than your heart. And no one even thinks twice about it. You're looking at rankings, you're looking at the major, you're looking at all that. Okay, so look at the guys we landed out of state that you're talking about. Jackson Cantwell. If I'm Jackson Cantwell, I don't have to go back to 2001 Bryant McKinney. I can just, even though McKinney talked to him, I think Wilfork talked to him too, but he could just go, all right, I see Francis Mauigoa is about to go top 10. I see Penei Sewell is probably the best tackle in the NFL. I see these other guys are going to get drafted. So it's a much more recent and practical path that he can point to. If you're Vance Spafford, and I know this because he said it, you go, okay, they had Restrepo last year. Restrepo was first team All-America. I'm faster than him in my position. Before that, they had Tank Dell, or Shannon Dawson at Tank Dell at Houston. He was the leading receiver in the country, and then he went to the pros. So that's a much more practical path that you're selling, as opposed to, hey, look at these highlights from 2001, and you're going to be blindly loyal because of that. It's different for a kid than for us. And I think when you look at some of the out-of-state guys, what we sell them a lot of times makes more sense than some of the guys we're losing. Carson Beck, you get Carson Beck, the number one quarterback in the portal. I mean, what are you telling Carson Beck? Cam Ward, right? So there's a recent comp for a lot of these highly rated guys we get. Not all, but a lot of them that may be different than these highly rated South Florida blue chips that are looking at Jeremiah Smith or, whoever, Patrick Surtain too, whoever that name your top ranked South Florida guy that left that presents a different path.
So, let's go back to what happens next year after Derrek Cooper. And listen, I don't think Miami has a high chance of flipping him, but I know they're not going to stop recruiting him. But if I go back like a couple of months, maybe you felt the same way. I don't know. But I remember thinking, Miami's probably going to get 2 out of the 3 of Javian Mallory, who's of course committed to Miami, Jay Lamar, who ultimately committed to Georgia, or, Derrek Cooper now commits to Texas. So what do you think happens at the running back position, D? Do you think Miami's going to stick with Javian Mallory and have one back in the class, or are they going to turn up the heat for somebody else, maybe a possible flip down the road?
We'll see. I mean, who knows how the senior seasons turn out? I think Derrek Cooper, they'll still try to flip him. You mentioned it. Mark Fletcher was a flip from Ohio State in November. Jordan Lyle was a flip from Ohio State, I want to say in December, like right before signing day. So those were late flips. If you have a good season, let's say, double digit, maybe a great season, probably going to run the ball pretty well. Offensive line is probably going to perform pretty well. You can circle back around on Cooper. I think people have talked about the NIL and these contracts. From what I'm told, this is not a situation, at least in the state of Florida, where Cooper's going to be financially restricted if he wanted to leave. So I think you're just going to keep on playing ball, try to flip Cooper down the road. If something else presents itself, who knows how opportunities fall? Maybe someone decommits that you don't expect to decommit and they're back on the market, or, someone emerges out of nowhere. I think back to like a Josh Jacobs, went to Alabama. No one even knew who he was coming as a senior. And then he had a huge senior year, and Alabama took him like right before signing day as a low rated player, first round pick, one of the best running backs in the NFL. So that happens. But I would think Cooper, trying to flip him, is the dream scenario for that second running back.
That makes sense. Well, when we come back, I want to take an advanced look at training camp coming up. I know D-Money's going to be out there. I'm going to be out there as much as I can. You want to keep it locked right here. What are going to be the hottest position battles this offseason at Miami? We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Keep it locked. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch. D-Money, owner of CanesInsight.com, is nice enough to join us here on this beautiful Monday morning. And hopefully it stays beautiful out there, because I got a long road trip ahead of me later on today. And then, D, in 10 days, it's going to be here before we know it. We're going to be covering that first practice in Coral Gables. There are obviously, certain spots like quarterback where we know Carson Beck is going to be the guy. But what do you look at heading into camp? What do you think are going to be the hottest position battles? Like when you're out there, which position groups are you watching thinking, I legitimately don't know who's going to start or what that rotation might look like?
Wide receiver, right? We talked about at the top, seeing how that one shakes out. Smart money, I would say the 3 that you hear the most buzz about would be CJ Daniels, JoJo Trader, and Malachi Tony. Tony's a freshman. He's competing with more experienced players. You got Tony Johnson from Cincinnati in the slot, Ray Joseph, who's been there. So experience-wise, he'll be behind, but he's the one you kind of hear the most buzz about. But we'll see. There's other guys in the mix. guys. Dykar will be battling. Hopefully Chance Robinson gets healthy from that class. And you talk about Upshaw, Josh Moore. So there'll be a lot of guys battling in that mix. We'll see the receiver position. That's one I'm watching. You also have Keelan Marion coming from BYU, who'll have something to say. Probably for sure he's going to make an impact as a returner and that kind of gadget player. What's he going to do as a receiver? We'll see there. And then I would say just defensive back in general. Safety, you got your top two with Zechariah Poyser and Jacoby Thomas, the two transfers. Jacoby Thomas was going to be the starter at Tennessee, ends up transferring to Miami. Hard-hitting type of player. Behind them, I don't know. Who's going to push up? Is it going to be Dylan Day? Is someone going to move over to that spot? Is Marquise Williams going to take that last step as a senior? We'll see at safety and the defensive back. You brought in more corners than you probably need. You already saw Emmanuel Carnley, who was a transfer from Arizona, leave. I think he went to Virginia because he was behind in that spring battle. Still a surplus at that position, which is nice after last year. So you have OJ Frederick, Xavier Lucas, Damari Brown, Charles Brantley from Michigan State is probably the most accomplished from a college perspective. He has some size questions there, but he's proven it in the Big Ten that he can play. Ethan O'Connor, who we mentioned, was a standout freshman at Washington State, 4 interceptions. Georgia tried to get him. You end up getting him. So we'll see how that position plays out. Bryce Fitzgerald's true freshman is going to have some opportunities. Jabari Antoine coming up from injury, 4-star player out of Louisiana. So Chris Ewald played a lot in spring in the nickel, 4-star from Chaminade. So a lot of names there. We'll see how that all shakes out. Keontae Scott, too. I didn't even mention him, who I think is going to be the favorite at nickel. Yeah, so that's a lot of names. You had last year, you were really running out of corners by the time you played Iowa State. You were putting safeties at corner in that bowl game. Now you got a surplus on paper. Let's see how it shakes out.
Yeah, no, and last thing here, D, I want to put you on the spot a little bit because I opened the episode talking about expectations. Like, and you mentioned, Miami won 10 games last year, but it left us unsatisfied, which is like 10 wins, something they hadn't done since 2017. It's a step in the right direction, but you didn't play in the ACC championship game. You didn't make it to the college football playoff, despite the best individual quarterback season in Miami history. You still fell short of some goals. And so, all right, heading into 2025, what are your goals? What are your expectations for Miami to accomplish this year?
Make the playoff, to me. I would say ACC championship, you want to win that. Obviously, you haven't done it yet. You have the most talented team on paper from a recruiting standpoint. Clemson is going to be the projected favorite, and they got some really good frontline players. I actually think in some ways we have certain advantages over Clemson. They have the great quarterback. They got great receivers. They have kind of marquee players, cornerback here, marquee defense alignment here. I don't think that their just overall physicality is the same as Miami. You saw when Miami played Clemson with a backup quarterback, they just sort of physically overwhelmed them, right? Bain, Mauanoa, we ran all over them. That's how we beat them. Now, we look at last year with Clemson. That was their weakness. Is they were 90th, I believe, in rushing yards against on an average basis. So our strength and Clemson's weakness kind of align, but they do have some frontline players, very experienced, good quarterback. So I don't think it's outlandish to say that we can beat Clemson and win the ACC, but we've never done it. So we'll see. Obviously, they've done it quite a few times. But overall, I think make the playoff. However it lands, if you're there in the playoff field of 12, you've now shown that, hey, we are one of the top teams. We're recruiting at that level. We're coaching at that level. Our expectations are we're in the game. That, to me, is where you want to be. Should have been there last year, as we know, but this year, certainly, you got to be in that playoff mix.
Amen to that. And what a joy it was being able to connect with D Money here on a Monday morning. And I've plugged you guys before, and I do it because I believe in what you're doing at CanesInsight.com. It's been great getting to know you over the last couple of years. Peter, I've known since he was like a kid. I feel like I've known Pete. Let the people know, D, what you got cooking today at Canes Insight. And I know you've got a show coming up a little bit later on this morning. Yeah, man, we're live every day, every morning. Much less scripted, man. You got the whole thing locked, man. This was easy. We got to kind of freestyle a little bit more. Well, the crazy thing about it is, like, you say scripted. That's just the way my weird brain works. I don't even write anything down. It's just all kind of, I don't know. It's like there's something wrong with me, D.
There's something right. It's very organized, very on point. So we'll be. I can't tell you what we'll be talking about, but it'll be something Canes related. In about 15 minutes. We go live.
Nice.
So yeah, we're on every day. We got also CanesInsight.com, 7.5 million posts and counting, #1 forum, just kind of Canes community as far as Canes fans talking to Canes fans on the planet. So sign up. It's all free. Sign up for the CanesInsight.com message boards. There's articles on there. It's all free, but really the community aspect is huge, and instant reactions and news. People post things. Someone posts something weird on social media, like an eye emoji or something. It's on our site in 0.5 seconds. So you want to plug in and like never miss anything. CanesInsight.com, definitely the place to be for that. And yeah, man, you're trying to be like you, man. Really just awesome to see what you've done in terms of this show, the consistency, the community. Now you're out on media day doing your thing. Looking forward to those interviews with the big dogs. And no, man, you're the man. My dream is to be vacationing in Europe for 6 weeks when I'm your age.
We'll work on that
now.
We'll work on that for next. I got a lot of restaurant recommendations for you if you make it out to Italy next year. That's for sure. I ate my way around the country.
There you go. I'm sure you probably did. You lose weight? That's what they say happens.
See, I ate so much. I was able to beat all the walking. Like people do say that. They're like, "Oh, don't worry, you'll lose weight no matter how." And I walked a ton, but all the pasta I stayed a step ahead of the walking, so I did gain a few pounds.
Well, look, it could have been worse, right? With the eating you were doing. So you still look the same. So
thank you.
Good on you. But yeah, man, awesome show, and fired up, man. It should be a fun year.
It should be. Well, huge shout out to D Money, and thanks everyone for joining us live here on a Monday morning. Make sure you smash that like button before you guys log out, and make sure you check out the audio version. We're available free, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. And we'll talk to you next time. I'll chat with you guys. We'll have a Locked On ACC from tonight out in Charlotte. New Locked On Canes tomorrow, hopefully with Mario Cristobal interviews, Carson Beck, Akeem Mesidor, Wesley Basaint, and Francis CC is going to be out there as well. So hopefully have all those for you guys. So we'll talk to you then on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.